Welcome, everybody, to our room with the topic of seeing opportunity in devastation, stories to inspire. We hosting a series at the moment around identifying a seller's market and how to stay in that seller's market. Now, Ed, who is leading the storytelling, wonderful storytelling, introduces all kinds of relevant topics, different facets of in and around activity within a seller's market. So, welcome, Ed. We are so excited to discuss this topic with you, listen to you again today. And Ed, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jacques. Thanks, people. Yeah, it's just to remind you of our topic, what we've chosen in the midst of our main theme of opportunity and devastation, is to say that the majority of organizations probably operate in a buyer's market, not particularly because they want to, but simply because they are there or there are too many vendors for what's around. So, a buyer's market definition is that there is an excess of capacity to supply, an excess of suppliers over the demand from the buyers. So, the buyers can pick and choose. Um, they can switch between vendors, they can bargain, and frequently prices and margins are fairly low, and the buyers have a lovely choice and they enjoy what they're doing. And if you think around, almost every market that you think of fits into that category. You can go to any one of three or four or five supermarkets and you'll find roughly the same commodities at roughly the same sort of prices. And the difference between which you buy from is often very, very marginal, like the ease of parking or the quality of the trolleys or something silly like that. And it doesn't matter what you look at, if you look at filling stations or if you look at motor cars that you could buy, there's a huge wide choice, even within one brand and one model of one brand. You could go to probably four or five dealerships and bargain with them for that. Those are all buyers' markets, and they're tough to work in. They're very tough to work in. They're highly competitive. Um, so if you can move yourself out of a buyer's market and into a seller's market, you generally speaking are a lot better off. Now, a seller's market's the other way around. There's an excess of demand over supply. So there are people who desperately want what you have to sell, and there are not a lot of suppliers who can supply it. So the buyers will often offer premium prices, sometimes even outbidding each other for the commodity or the service. Um, and the vendor can pick and choose who he or she sells to, and it's quite a nice life to live. You have high prices, very good margins, um, and you, generally speaking, are highly profitable and probably enjoying life. It's actually quite fun to turn away would be buyers because they don't fit your image. So you can play those tricks. So getting into a seller's market without being vindictive about it, just to enjoy it and to make a lot of money, is highly desirable. But how do you break out of the buyer's market and into a seller's market? Conversely, if you're in a seller's market, how do you make sure you stay there? To me, one of the biggest secrets is focus. How focused are you on your target customer? How well do you know them? How well do you provide what they want? Let me give you an illustration. There's a company, I believe its name is Torito Networks. They were started, I suppose, about 10 years ago now by two very successful young account managers. They worked for a major internet service provider. They looked after accounts like big banks, big government departments. They had big teams of people, working managers, specialist engineers, and everything else. And they were living high on the hog. They were making a lot of money, They were doing extremely well, and they, as one does in this sort of field, they were having a drink with one of the other account managers in the same business, but that account manager handled the smaller end of the business, the SMEs. And they got chatting about their relative territories. And the guy with the SME business was asked how many accounts he had, and he had just over 300 that he had to service. So they expressed some astonishment and said, "But how do you look after them?" He said, "Well, of course I can't. If I just visited one once a day, it would take me 2 years to get around to all of them.
Sure.
It's impossible to look after 300. So I pick 30 of them and I look after them, and the rest of them just have to deal with the call center." Now, Jacques, I'm sure you see opportunity leaping out of devastation. Yeah.
Yep. I can see that. Ooh, can lick my lips. There were 270 of them.
And these two young gentlemen licked their lips and took a big gamble and resigned their high flying, very highly paid positions and set up a company to service the small end of the market and to keep them. And they went through some very, very rough times. But they finally got a good start in life. And to keep themselves honest, they set a limitation on who they would sell to. They said they wouldn't sell to companies that needed less than a certain number of connected devices, and they wouldn't sell to companies that needed more than a certain number of connected devices. So this typically pushed them into the space of a small to medium manufacturing organization. Sorry, a medium, more the medium sized manufacturing organization or construction company, and a small to medium services type company. So a typical, maybe 5 or 7 partner law firm or an accountant's firm or something like that, or a manufacturer that employed maybe 100 people would be inside their territory. And then they decided that they had to provide a wonderful level of service. So they did something else, which was very revolutionary at the time. They said, in their belief, and their research confirmed this, that don't mind who actually connects them to the internet. They don't actually care if it's this service provider or that service provider. All they want is reliable internet connectivity and good front end service. So they developed tier one relations with all of the tier one internet providers, and they just put in whatever was most appropriate at that time in that place. So that the internet speeds would always be effective and good, and they provided excellent service. And their model worked. And they grew from a very small base, in fact, from a zero base. In fact, if you knew the whole story, from slightly below zero base, they grew to a a 10 million rand a year company in 4 years. Not bad going. And they
No.
continued that growth. Their growth rate at one stage was 60%, 60% per annum.
Wow.
They've since, last time I spoke to them, they've since lifted their sights more into the medium and small end of the large business environment, but they still focus. That's exactly what they do, and that's all they do. They were offered fantastic big contracts because they were giving such great service, and they had to turn them down. Contracts that were worth millions a month. And they said, no, they're keeping the faith, and they turned them down. Now, that takes a little energy to do. But they've since acquired other companies, and they do very, very well indeed. And they are the go to guys. If you fall in that market sector, those are the people you should go and talk to. Shouldn't talk to anybody else at all because
How
they
do they
know
market
what they're
themselves,
doing.
Ed?
Very, very quietly, very targeted. They've identified their target market, so you probably wouldn't know about it, or I wouldn't know about it because we're not in their target market. If you're in their target market, you will see their marketing, but it's very direct, very focused, and most of their sales, in fact, come by word of mouth, not by any sort of outgoing marketing effort, because once again, their service levels are great. Now, this to me is an example of moving out of a buyer's market where internet connectivity, man, is a rough and tumble. There are too many players in it, there's too much choice, there are ads that scream different prices every hour of the day. To move yourself into a little excellent sector like that, to me, is absolutely wonderful and a brilliant illustration of how to do it. Now, how do you stay there? Very easy. If someone comes along waving a multi-million dollar a month contract, should you do it? Their answer was no. Their answer was stay with what's working for us. Stay with the formula. We're growing at an astronomical pace. Why would we put that at risk for a short term gain, which could as easily be taken away from us? So, yeah, nice illustration there. Lovely people. If you read up in the old Entrepreneur magazine, you'll find an article in there somewhere about this particular company. It was written a couple of years ago. So, in their case, focus worked very well for them. And there's a number of other companies that we could cite that did exactly the same. Now, let's look at the other side of the coin and say, how can you put yourself in a buyer's market or bury yourself deeper in a buyer's market? Because neither a seller's nor a buyer's market is a sort of light switch kind of opportunity. There are graduations inside it. So there are buyers markets where the demand almost equals the supply, but it isn't quite exactly the same. And there are buyers markets where there are thousands of sellers and only a few buyers. And we could think of illustrations of both of those ends of the market. Um, we only have to look at our unemployment rate and the rate of people trying to hawk goods on the side of the road and through hawkers' stalls and so on to see very, very good illustrations of that kind of market where there are thousands and thousands of vendors and not enough buyers. Souvenir uh, shops and similar. And in terms of the sellers market, once again, there are some absolutely uniques where you can only get it from one person and it's only one product. And if you want that particular product, and many people do want that particular product, that's where you got to go. A lot of the Apple stores have been in exactly that position. You want the latest iPhone? The only way you can do it is to do it through a certain number of channels. So, and in other parts, there again, there's nearly an equal balance of buyers and sellers. So the market deepens both sides. It's not a light switch, an on-off light switch where you're either in a buyer's or a seller's market, and then everything is identical. So I was talking about either throwing yourself into a buyer's market or going deeper into a buyer's market. Well, one of the cleverer ways of going deeper into a buyer's market is to lose your focus. So let's say you have a target market, you know what it is, you understand that market, you are selling in that market, your company is doing very good business in that market, and it is thriving in that market. And then, for whatever reason, maybe increased competition, maybe changes in technology, maybe changes in the political scene or the legislative scene or anything which may be outside your control, or perhaps your customer service slipped a little bit and people started laying complaints and you didn't really take note of those. Your edge, your seller's market edge starts to slip and you no longer make the targets that you need to make. And as so often happens in this case, and it happens with large organizations and it happens with individual salespeople, you then start grabbing at whatever opportunities there are around, whether you should be taking them or not. And I'm sure, Jacques, you've seen this happen. That
Absolutely.
people suddenly they get this desperation look. They are losing money. They're not making targets. They're not making the income that they need. And so now they start grabbing at things, and the whole sales marketing wheel turns. Instead of selling to customer needs, they start selling because of their own need. So if you satisfy your needs before you satisfy your customer needs, you can be in trouble. There's no golden rule of selling which says if you satisfy the customer needs, your needs go away because of course you sell. If you satisfy your needs first before the customer, then the customer goes away. And so often it happens in these circumstances that people get defocused, start going after business they should never be chasing. It's not suitable. They're selling for their own needs, not for those of the customer. And the customer senses it and they don't want to do business anymore. And so they do disappear, and the situation gets worse and worse and worse. And finally, sadly, sometimes businesses that fall into this trap fail. They don't just fall to the bottom of the buyer's market, they actually cannot continue to survive. And that's a great tragedy because right now we can't afford to lose any businesses. Even if they're bad businesses, they should be rehabilitated to become good businesses because we have an unprecedented unemployment rate. So businesses should not be failing. Businesses should be succeeding wildly. Businesses should be thriving and growing and employing more people and buying more technology and more supplies and more raw materials so that it keeps their supply chain busy and there are more suppliers and therefore more employees among their suppliers. And the whole thing becomes a very positive wheel. Going the other way around, it all goes negative because it doesn't only affect that business, it affects a whole lot of other businesses, their suppliers, from their auditors and accountants and lawyers to their raw material suppliers and their landlords and all sorts of other people along the line. And once it starts affecting them, then the unemployment crisis deepens further and the economy staggers even lower. So we can't afford that. So I would urge people who find themselves in that sort of wild eyed desperation of saying, where am I going to make the next sale because that's just not happening? Or how can I get back onto my forecast because it's just not happening? To take a serious step back and look at themselves and say, what am I doing wrong that's pushing me down this hill away from the seller's market and into the buyer's market or deeper into the buyer's market? And what can I do to turn this around to move up the hill again and get into the more exclusive zone where customers just love me and they continue to come to me? Because frequently that has been from a self inflicted injury. You've got complacent, your quality may have slipped, your customer service may have slipped, your advertising and marketing might be outdated and frankly just not effective anymore. You haven't kept up with the trends, you don't understand what your competitors are doing, and you don't see where we're going in the marketplace. And that's sad. And I have every sympathy with business people who find themselves in that situation because it is tough running a business. It's very, very tough just to keep it going on a day to day basis, let alone setting aside time for doing what I'm suggesting you should be doing. And I can just hear lots and lots of business people saying, "Oh, very well for you, but what am I going to do with all of these emails that I've got to answer and the payroll that's got to be paid out of money I don't have, and all the other daily issues?" Nobody said being an entrepreneur was going to be easy.
Got a question, Ed. You know, you mentioned the driver to the loose of that focus where desperation sets in. So my question is, and you know, I always ask these softer questions, but how do I get rid of the panic?
Very good question. Um, Very, very good question, because once you're in that mode, it's actually very difficult to think straight, very difficult to think strategically. There are a couple of possible solutions. The most obvious solution is to say, let me get some outside help. Let me talk to someone who can look at this with more rationality than I'm now displaying and give me some ideas on how to think. So go and look for a mentor and see what you can come up with. Now, most people in that situation wouldn't look for a mentor because they would say, I'm already cash strapped and these guys cost money. Um, but it would be a wise move to get at least some outside counsel at that stage to just get your way of thinking into a more constructive way, because panic is very, very destructive. The second way to do it is the bite-sized chunks, or the baby step method. So instead of looking at the big picture, you just focus steadily on doing one right thing now. And then when that's finished, focus on doing one other right thing now. And then when that's finished, focus on doing one other right thing now. It's the old eating the elephant plan. You can only eat an elephant one bite at a time. If you keep trying to focus on how you're ever going to eat the elephant, you will starve to death. And that's often the case in these circumstances. That there are many right things that they could do. Just go and talk to one customer and say, what can I do for you that would be so unique that you would love to do business for me, with me? And of course, the customer will say, "Well, give it to me for nothing." But once you got past that bit of facetiousness, you can start getting down to serious questions. What could I actually do? The one right thing could be, let's really look and see what people are saying about us. Go and have a look on Hello Peter. Look on all of the social media and see if you're getting adverse comments around there. Talk to your staff and see who's complained recently. Go through your invoices and look for the levels of inaccuracy, of bad spelling, of people's names being wrong, and all of those kind of things. And then fix the little things. And surprisingly enough, once you start with that positive, one step at a time thing, the momentum builds very, very rapidly. And often you'd be surprised how much you achieve by fixing just one little thing at a time, by being positive about one little thing at a time. That's not new theory, that's a very old theory. I understand that it is very widely used by some of the narcotic and drug and alcohol associations to wean people off their addictions, where they are taught that only today I have to worry about. Today I will not take a drink. And those days mount up, and eventually that can mount up to decades. But they still say every day, today I will not have a drink. So
Uh, uh,
that can work very well.
Agreed.
The combination of the two, the mentor and doing one thing right at a time, is often the one which will turn the tide quickest.
You know, it often when the panic subsides and there's now prevailing calm, the the question normally that seems to take effect is, what can I do? What, not what can't I do, what can I do? Is have a so obviously if you want to, you were talking about slipping deeper into and hitting rock bottom into the buyer's market. So if you are able to set your sights on right bite-sized chunks of doing things, but also aiming at something that's kind of within your grasp, and you say, what is it that I can do? Because you still have special skills, abilities, machineries, all kinds of things like that, um, that you can do. Maybe what you can do, you just do it in a way that's different. I mean, what you said earlier on is just go speak to your client.
Mm.
Get an idea of how you can tweak, redeploy, harness what you have in just a different way. Um, and we because this is a series, we in different places we have talked about this before, but the emphasis I want to place is not what I ought to do, what I should be doing, but really the three little letters: what can I be doing? All in the old school way of what's the art of the possible for me,
Yeah.
because you dig into what you have, into the storehouse that's available to you, into the toolbox that's available to you, and
Yeah.
apply it differently.
Excellent point, Jacques. And if I can just add to that point, once you start looking in that toolbox and say, what can I do? What have I got? What can I do really well? You'd be surprised as how much there is in that toolbox, some of which is just not been used for years because you got too busy or things changed or whatever. There's so many times I've heard people say when going through this sort of phase to say, I had such good relationships with my customers. We were on first name terms. We went to rugby together. We, played golf together. Where did that all go? And it was something where the guy had an ability to make connections with people at a fairly deep level. And that ability was still there, just wasn't being used. Somewhere in the bottom of the toolbox, getting rusty. That's sad. Dig it out, clean off the rust, start using it. There's so much you can do. There's so much.
Yes.
And people who have survived through this situation will often look back in a bit of bewilderment and say, how did I let that happen? How did I let it go so badly wrong? Similar to the situation where people have found themselves in a car accident or something like that, and they look back on it with absolute bewilderment and say, how, how could that have happened to me? I know how to drive. You know, I should not have, they may not say I should not have, but they're bewildered by how that suddenly happened to them
Hmm.
when they know better.
Hmm.
And yeah, we're all guilty of these things. Eh? Life is a complicated thing. Uh, we can't we can't remember to do all the right things all the right times. What we can remember to do is not to forget how to do right things when there are times of need.
Absolutely. So that's a good point just to conclude.
Mm.
And so wherever, if you listening to this audio, wherever you are, just remember, what it has brought to us today is, even if you have been sliding deeper into a buyer's market and find yourself at rock bottom, in order for you to refocus, let your panic subside, talk to somebody, re-engage with your creative side. But you don't have to look outside of your business. Look into your toolbox, dust off the rust that may have been gathering there, and ask yourself the question: what is within my hands to do? What can I do right now? And by the way, the phrase that you use is proceed by and build momentum with bite-sized steps, one step after the other, but it's regaining that momentum of moving forward and turning your business around. So Ed, thank you very much. And
Thank you,
for
Jacques, and
those,
thanks to those attending.
that's fantastic. And for those listening, what we do is we upload this audio into the Griffin Enterprise Development channel, and it's there for you to access if you so need. But thank you very much, everyone, and bye for now until next week.